Hey, what's going on, brother? Thank you for listening to this episode of the Becoming Kings podcast. And I am so fortunate to have in the virtual studio Garrett Gunderson chiming in from, I guess you're in Salt Lake as of this moment. Is that right?
Yeah, man, in Salt Lake, my
Good
house
old.
right now. So,
I
dude, I
love
end
it.
up here because my dad is a coal miner. My
Yeah.
grandfathers are coal miners, and 2 hours southeast of here is like a bunch of coal mines. And
Yeah.
and then I grew up Catholic and met this Catholic girl, which in Utah, is rare. And we fell
Yeah.
in love and got married. And her whole family lives here, and we love the mountains. I'm more of a mountain and stream and person than I am
Yeah.
more of a beach person. Like I like to go to the beach for a couple days. Like I was
Yeah.
just thinking, on the coast, and like the waves were so damn loud I couldn't sleep. So like that I could go to my cabin and listen to the river in the background and
Yeah.
the tree leaves and the wind and all that kind of stuff. And just
Totally.
like, dude, I love having a chainsaw. It's just fun to just chop wood with an axe. My boys, I took them to this like survival camp, and they just love chopping wood. Like
Yeah.
family thing to do. I like to just take the chainsaw and crush some things.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah. So
Yeah.
ask, but I'm just offering, like you said, you live in Salt Lake. I'm like, here's a bunch of useless information for all the viewers.
Yeah, yeah. No, I love it. We're neighboring states. I'm currently in Austin. You said you're coming down here for a couple of speaking events, and I'm heading back up to Colorado. But we have that in common. Love the mountains. I feel like it's the masculine energy that has always attracted me to the mountains. And then I think of more of the ocean as the feminine, but and love certainly going to the beach. But yeah, there's something about being up in the mountains, hiking, camping. God, I love it.
I
I
like
just
I like
love
to
it.
bow hunt. Like I really love to
Yeah.
uh,
Cool.
bow hunt elk, and so that's a lot of fun. Take my dad who's 70 with me, and
Good
dude,
for
you gotta
you.
be a badass to be 70, just hiking around the mountain. He
100%.
he shot an elk with a bow last year. I was standing right next to him. It was super cool.
Damn.
The
That's really cool.
there was elk that he'd shot and killed, and like, yeah, it was really awesome. I like bow hunting is like hiking with a purpose. You know what I'm saying? And I
Totally.
can be really present for long periods of time when I do it. And then I just like when I'm writing to be out my
Hmm.
cabin and go shoot my bow a few times, just some targets, and then go back up and write. So just kind of a nice little meditative practice.
Dude, living the dream. I don't think there's many other I mean, that's pretty primal to just be kind of stalking big game through the woods with a bow and arrow.
Well, dude, so my buddy Ben calls me. He's like, "Hey, you want to go hunting?" This is in 2020. I'm like, "Yeah." We had done a, he'd been a client for years. I've been on his podcast, and we've hung out quite a bit. And so I go buy a gun, and I sent a picture of the gun. He goes, "Dude, we're bow hunting." It was 33 days away. I'd never bow hunted. So I was like
Shit.
shooting 15 shots 3 times a day, preparing. And we go to New Mexico. And dude, I remember like it was 100 some degrees the first 2 days, nothing's moving. Then it finally just gets down to like in the 80s,
Hmm.
1,000 yards away. This guide spots an elk, calls it, it starts coming, dude. I'm like kneeling next to this tree. And when it's 300 yards away, I can hear it like,
Hmm.
stopping basically as it's running. My heart's pounding, and then I hear another elk that's like, "Oh, you're not coming on my territory."
Oh
And
no.
I end up killing that elk. And when I hit it, so much adrenaline, like it was like DNA unlocked in my body. It was
Mm.
15 minutes of like elation and insane. I couldn't believe it.
That's awesome.
Like I was like,
That's
dude, it's
awesome.
so different than a gun. Like it was, and I mean, I'm 25 yards away, right? And I'm
Yeah,
having to
yeah.
calm my heart rate down and like stay steady. And I was a beginner, so that was a pretty amazing,
That's crazy.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
first
That's
hunt out. Yeah,
Oh my
wow.
gosh. Dude, those are epic memories that you'll never forget with you, obviously for you and with your dad, everything else. Those are pretty phenomenal. So
Yeah.
cool. So cool. Well, for those listening, are like, okay, who's this guy? Why are we listening to these crazy adventures, which is probably just the tip of the iceberg of who you are. But if you don't mind, since I'm so excited to have you on, fill the listener in on, I mean, your bio, I could read for the next 10 minutes. It's pretty prolific, but tell them a little bit about your books. Tell them about
I
all
know
the things
some
that you
people are
do.
just listening on audio, but for those that
Yeah,
are seeing this on video, I just got this on my hands yesterday at the time that we're recording this. This is my children's book that comes out in January. It's called I
that's
Am
so
I Don't
cool.
Grow on Trees. It's beautiful, man. It's like a piece of art. I'm dedicated to planting a seed of hope, connection, and expression in the hearts of 1 billion people before I die, using entertainment as a gateway to transformation and help
Mm,
people restore love to their life and heal their relationship with money. So I've written 9 other books. My other book, Money
jeez.
just came out doing pretty well out the gate. So I'm excited
Beautiful.
about that. Like
Beautiful.
we're almost 2 months in. It'll be 2 months in December by probably the time this is live. And
Congrats.
yeah, we sold like 8,200 copies so far. So that's kind of exciting.
Really exciting.
But yeah, I love to write, dude. I fell in love with it. I was scared to write when I started. I wrote Killing Sacred Cows, but I was in my, early 20s when I wrote it. I can't believe I knew what I knew. I just had an insatiable curiosity, asked a lot of questions. But, here I am still writing more and enjoying that process, because I think that money's an intimidating topic for a lot of people and a boring topic for a lot of people, but critically important. So I'm dedicating myself to the craft of like, how do I make it more accessible, more enjoyable, and more memorable so that people can really take actionable steps to improve their life? So I built and sold an Inc. 500 financial firm, just sold it in 2021, filmed a comedy special, because why not do comedy?
Why not?
The money,
Yeah.
I'm kind of like, I went to Italy years ago and I became like a Renaissance man afterwards. I like came back, got my whiskey somm. I, learned how to make a damn good latte and pour over coffee, and started to fly fish a little bit, because I just feel like wealth is a byproduct of a life well lived. So how can I live life really well? How can I enjoy it along the way and kind of master the art of living and blend and blur those lines between work and play, which isn't always easy, man. I've been going through a couple months where I'm just trying to figure that out a little bit more, because I have had a lot of opportunity and I've had certain separation from old businesses. So it's a journey, and I don't have it all figured out, but I like to talk about it along the way.
I love it. I think you're doing it right. Just with the curiosity, I feel like that brings, or it should bring along some humility, and I feel like the older we get, and I don't want to speak for you, but I know for me that the older I get, the more I learn, the more I realize I don't know, right? As the saying goes. But I would ask you, for someone who is intimidated by money, maybe they have a lot of money blocks or money trauma, if you will, from their past. Of any of your books, where would you suggest that they start, and why?
Money Unmasked, I know it's my most recent book, but it's the book that delves into that by far more than the other ones. The second one, though, would be Disrupting Sacred Cows, because I really go into like childhood and what happens in our childhood and how that shapes our kind of our money memory. And then I have 3 pages of resources at the end that are like, hey, these are the things I'm not an expert in, but help us deal with those childhood things. And so people have had really good progress on that. But Money Unmasked gets into your money persona. There's 4 different personas. There's a shadow side and a winning side. It can really show us our footprints of what leads to failure or what leads to more abundance and prosperity. And so that it can be a lot more predictable, and then we can avoid some of the missteps and mistakes, and also understand the dynamic of other money personas that we're in relationship with, whether that's a spouse or a business partner or whoever it is, that really informs us how they go about making their choices.
I love that. Well, what are, if any, are the challenges that you kind of grew up, that you've grown through, healed from, if any?
Yeah, and I still am cultivating some. Like I just realized recently, like one of my early memories of money was when it was really tough, because my dad worked for coal mines, and when the unions would go on strike, all of a sudden they're like doing everything they can to make ends meet. And I thought, man, if I make enough money, my family won't have to suffer. So I started to take on this notion of, if I could be successful enough, I could be so important that, like, my great grandfather was separated from my great grandmother for 7 years because they didn't have money, and he came to the United States to make money and bring her over. Or,
Can you imagine?
Yeah, dude, 7 years. Like
7 years.
Was gone for 5 weeks last year. She went to India to do this health stuff, and dude, that was a tough 5 weeks, man. For me, I was like, I missed her bad. Like we have 2 kids. It was like great bonding for me and them. But like, I just realized how much I've invested in that marriage and relationship, how instrumental she is in my life. But dude, 7 years. And he lived
7 years.
Like he lived in a tent. They didn't have phones. It's not like he could call her. It's like Italy. I mean, the phone that in a tent, there isn't a phone in a tent. There's landlines. What were they paying back then? He's sending letters, right? And then waiting for a response. Like, dude, that is rough. And English isn't even a language he really speaks when he comes over. So he has to learn that on top of living in a tent and being a goat herd before he becomes a coal miner. That actually leaves scars on someone's money blueprint that can hand down from generation to generation. You almost inherit those belief systems,
Absolutely. Yeah. And when you kind of put things into perspective and you hear a story like that, I know for myself, and I wonder for the listeners / viewers, if it's like, man, why do we why do we end up feeling in a world of such abundance that we're living with such scarcity, or it's just not enough compared to, whoever else on Instagram or social media, compared to what previous generations, our lineage, each of us wouldn't be here obviously without our ancestors, what they had to go through for us to live this life. And we're still not oftentimes grateful for it. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, and part of it's because I really feel like there's a design in society to intentionally create this gap where we're yearning to earn more, and we get in that hustle and grind, and we think if we just have more, we'll be happier. And they get us convinced that it's the awards, the accolades, and the future, and the goals, and the revenue, and we just sacrifice our whole life for that. And then we get there, and it feels hollow, because if you get there alone, you lost. If you lose your health and get there, you lost. If you destroy all your meaningful relationships, or you have to repair them, that's something that could take 10 times longer than it ever took to make the money in the first place. Yet it's just so much of, fake book and all this kind of stuff where people are just putting this lifestyle up there that's not real. And by the way, I just think that it's human nature to compare our worst to someone's best. And by the way, they're false best. They're presented best, And part of what attracts me to people is when they're more vulnerable, when they're willing to share their scars, when they're willing to talk about their lessons, when they're not acting like they just had it all figured out all the time forever, and at the same time celebrate the victories and celebrate their wins, and understand that they do achieve great things. And that's a great thing to cheer on because it shows possibility. But we're humans and we get jealous, man. It's just part of the nature of human beings.
Yeah. And I think that still goes back to what I was attracted to your content. I feel like you do such a good job of, like you said, incorporating kind of a theatrical storytelling, a very entertaining type of way of delivering your content, but also mixing just a ton of kind of like psychological foundation of understanding like why we do things and why we have blocks and how to kind of work our way through some of these things that can be debilitating. And like we all, well, I can't assume, but I think a lot of people know that a lot of relationships end because of financial, bickering and dissension, right? So
this is the number one reason for divorce.
Yeah.
I think what happens is when we have money troubles, we stop dreaming about a better future and we think our past was better. Because that turmoil kind of stifles all vision. And if all of a sudden everything's about, we've lost energy, we're frustrated, we're feeling scarce, a lot of people have a hard time accepting responsibility and taking a better step. So they start blaming their spouse. They start projecting upon them. Like I know in 2008, when the market went down, I had a lot of real estate. Like that really triggered me being like, man, am I valuable of being loved? Like, because I saw so much of my identity, and I had growth for 10 consecutive years, Inc. 500, New York Times, financial author. And it's like, oh, damn, I'm more fragile than I thought. I'm exposed because I'm over leveraged. And it really was psychologically tough for me to be like, all right, well, who am I now that I'm not in growth mode for 10 straight years?
Yeah.
I was really naive. Like I remember I got interviewed for this magazine and they put me on the cover. I was on the salt flats with my Bentley trying to look all cool. And they were like, well, what do you want? What's next for you? I'm like, oh, I've made so much money, I could never spend it. It's just, what can I do to pay it forward? And then for the next 2 years, I just watched all that money just go down the drain to banks and institutions, to equity just being demolished.
Yeah, crazy.
Because I didn't know my investor DNA. I was trying to just hit goals without knowing, like, who am I? What do I really want? What's my winning game? What am I going to do? What am I not going to do? Everything is just kind of about more. And more is a seductive temptress that can move us away from who we are in pursuit of something that we can never achieve. And in that pursuit, we lose because it's never enough. And dude, that's a tough, insatiable appetite to come to terms with. Like I want to have these things that don't even seem like they could be possible together, like growth and contentment. What about having both? What about being content with who I am, but I'll still growing over time, learning my lessons, impacting people, but at the same time, taking some time off, enjoying life along the way. It's not an either or, but a lot of times it's designed to make us think that it is.
Right. Well, let's delve into that investor DNA a little bit because, again, watching some of your content, I think you're talking about, like, if your thing is real estate, go for that. If you're, into stocks or day trading, like, do your thing, like find your thing and stay in your lane. Right. But I think a lot of people find someone, and correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm certainly guilty of that too, until I read the Millionaire Blueprint. It's like, I found someone that I want to emulate, but they're not like me. And then I have such a hard time trying to be them.
Right.
And it's just not me, right?
Because it's not congruent. So you're battling uphill versus finding that effortless flow, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is what your investor DNA is. And
Mm-hmm.
so the first thing with investor DNA is, I think that we have to give up this notion of being completely passive investors, where we're portfolio investors that just hand our money over and hope for the best because they're smarter than us.
Right.
And instead look at, like, what if we pick one of the big three? Intellectual property. That's my main investment. I like to write books. I like to create courses. I like to, write keynotes. I like intellectual property is the game that I love. Real estate, but real estate that you could touch. Like, not just some REIT that you just have no idea what's going on with it, right? Or businesses. Like, maybe you pick one of those lanes, maybe you eventually do all three, but those are the big three to really advance. You just have to figure out what your investor DNA is. See, I don't love the real estate that I used to do, where I was just buying apartment complexes or, duplexes, fourplexes that I never really went to. I was just giving my money. I was talking to bankers. I was talking to property managers. Now I'm like, I have property I could drive to that I could rent out to my businesses, and I don't have to go outside of those businesses because podcast studio's there. So I do my one-on-one cash cabin immersions, or I build a music studio. And I know these are places where there's nothing for sale. I understand that it's a very valuable area that I personally know. But the hard thing for me was to try not to own everything, because the old me was like, I just should do more. I should own more properties. I own 9. That's not enough. Someone else owns 10 or 200. And so I didn't really have a plan other than more. And so now it's like, part of my framework is, does it improve my quality of life? And when I have an investment, I go, how much of that can enhance my quality of life today? How much of that can enhance my skill sets because I invest back into me? And how much of it can enhance my cash flow? And I start breaking it into those 3 categories of the big 3: intellectual property, real estate, and businesses. And then investing in myself, which is skill sets, investing in my quality of life, which is my overall energy and enjoyment, and then investing in my cash flow. And so it's a different type of portfolio. And in that portfolio, I don't accumulate. Accumulation says wait for 30 years and then you can live off your interest. I want to accelerate, which says focus on cash flow and velocity, which is how do I get my money to turn more than once, and how do I get that to create economic independence. I don't go to retirement because I want to build a life I don't ever want to retire from. So economic independence replaces retirement, because now when I have my assets taking off enough cash flow, I can swing for the fences in everything I do, knowing that my foundation is handled. And at the center of this is investor DNA, not diversification. Most people are sold diversification, which is a great strategy if you're already wealthy. It's how you might preserve your wealth. But on the ride to wealth, diversification is diversification, because you spread yourself thin, you slow it down, and you're not related to the outcome of that investment.
I think about that in terms of, because I relate a lot of it back to, I've just always been an athlete and kind of a gym guy. But like, if I were, 5 days out of the week doing lifting, and then I go to HIIT training, and then I do, Pilates and yoga, but I don't actually ever really dive into one, then I never really gain strength. I never actually improve. Like, to your point, you're right. Like diversification, I've never actually heard of that, but it makes total sense.
It's diversification for most people. Diversification, right?
Yeah. Such a good point.
It's admission of ignorance. I don't know it's going to work. I'll spread myself thin. But by the way, we only diversify prematurely when we rely on other people to make our investments for us and not ourselves. And part of it, we've just been lied to and we bought into the lie. I'm not smart enough. I don't have enough time. I've just got to trust the experts. But most of those experts are salespeople handing it off to someone they've never met. So we're further removed from the outcome. And this is where a lot of risk comes from. I'm like, invest first in yourself so you can make more money. That's the first process. The second is, before you try to scrimp, save, or sacrifice, or even budget, let's plug your financial leaks. Let's save money on taxes, on interest, on non-performing investment fees, or on insurance costs that could be removed. Let's remove those. So let's go for efficiency. So make more, then keep more, then learn how to grow your money. Growing your money is a little bit more involved than people really want to believe. And it's a little bit more complicated if you get involved in too many things, because you can never be an expert at that number of things and still have a quality of life. So that's why I'm saying you pick a lane and focus. And then you make sure to do risk management and risk mitigation so that you're not overextended. Like building your foundation makes a difference. Creating sustainable structures like asset protection and liability and and transferring risk is important. And then you just really pay attention to the eggs in your basket versus having too many eggs that you don't even know what they are. And it's different than what most people are taught in the common world of investing, but it's not different than what the wealthiest people do. It's actually what they do. They only start diversifying when they've really hit home runs and have good cash flow streams, and they can have it managed because they have the right CEO, CFO, or something like that before they go to the next realm of deals, right? So
I love asking guys that I work with, if you were to be given $1 million for one reason or another, what would you do with that $1 million? To kind of see where their mindset's at. Are you going to buy a house? Are you going to invest it? What are you going to do? You're going to sit on it. And I'm by no stretch of the imagination any type of financial guru, but I will say that I have intellectual capital, I have some real estate, but I've started to be like and seeing kind of my dad's own entrepreneurial journey, and watching. I just always fell in love with The Profit and Shark Tank and all those other shows. I'm like, man, businesses for the same amount of money that I could buy a house with, I can buy a business, and then really. To me, it's just kind of clicked over the last, let's say, 5 to 10 years, how important cash flow is. But you also said two other things: lifestyle and like skill set investment, right?
Yeah.
Which I don't always think about, although that's so true. If I'm not stimulated, if I'm not growing, I'm not happy personally.
Right. But, and I'm talking about skill sets like communication, marketing, sales, attention, and fulfillment. Like those are the skills that a lot of people neglect. Like I'm kind of like refining myself in that area because I got really good having this marketing team at my last firm that they knew how to run ads and they knew how to build. Like I became less and less involved, which means I'm not as sharp. I haven't been to the gym of marketing as much lately.
Yeah, right.
Sales, I haven't done sales. I had a sales team. So I'm reinvesting in those as I'm building the next round because it's important, and retention. It's always about like, how do I continue to add value? Like those skills make such a big difference. A lot of people focus on improving a skill that doesn't move the needle. It's just, it's something that they enjoy, and that's fine. Like, go ahead, but be careful to differentiate skill and hobby. I very much encourage hobbies, but investing in that hobby might not move the needle to adding value and improving your financial life. It might just be something that you enjoy, which I would say go all in on, but just differentiate that that's a quality of life thing, not a skill set thing. Right.
Yeah, right. Which makes me think, though, and I'm certainly guilty of this, but I do feel like similar along the topic of diversification. I feel like sometimes people are focused on so many different things, which is playing not to lose ultimately and spreading themselves out, because even deeper, I imagine they're scared to go for it. Right. Because if they were to go for it and actually fail, go all in, stay in their lane and go for it and fail, then it would boil down to them not being lovable or not being enough or something like that. Right. There's always some sort of deeper fear. I imagine.
That's the question most of us have always asked and we wouldn't say out loud, is that am I lovable thing. It's in the back of our minds, right? We make a mistake. We don't know if we have enough. We know someone that's doing more. We compare, like, I think it's just not spoken very often, but it's kind of this context or subcontext that's usually in the back of people's minds. And the more we can start to love and accept ourselves, I think the more we can become creative, the more we can become happy, the more capacity we have to love others, the more we have capacity to have energy and connect with others. It's just, I don't really know a really good map when I was a kid. When I was a kid, I went to Catholic school and it was like, hey, feel guilty, feel shame.
Yeah.
It was a lot of that,
Yeah.
If you do this, you're bad. If you say, I remember a nun tell me if I said fuck, that it was putting me closer to hell. And then I just one day decided to say it as many times as I could to rebel. You know what I'm saying? Like, what is like, it's just, but like, there was all those constraints that were given about like trying to operate within someone else's purview versus our own perspective.
Yeah. Within, rules, within boundaries. And it usually keeps us stifled and playing small.
Unexpressed, stifled, playing small. Yep.
Yeah.
All that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's awesome. You said do you work with guys one-on-one? Do you work with men and women in group? What does that look like? If people were, attracted to what you're talking about, what does that even look like? And how do you start, what type of person would find themselves wanting to work with you? Someone who's just wanting to grow their wealth? Is it
It's one of
money
two
issues?
people.
Is it
Yeah, one of two people, and typically I work with like a couple, right? Like meaning a husband and a wife, or wife and whatever it is, right? And in those situations, I want to at least be able to save them 7 figures. So because I'm only doing like 24 of these a year. And we go up to my cabin. It's called Cash Cabin.
Cool.
We use this 4-part framework of, where can we save them with the IRS, with interest, with non-performing investment fees, or restructuring insurances. So we're finding money first. Then it's about those 3 categories that I shared with, right? Quality of life, skill set, and then cash flow. And then what we're looking at is, if we dive deep, what is it that's underneath that they've never shared, that if I can ask them the right question, they can get to the answer they've never had. And that's really everything from their money blueprints, their money personas, their money stories, and getting on the same page there, because then it can accelerate results. Then we look for like their flow, and then we look for like their 5 objectives. And what's really critical is, for 25 years, I've been in the world of building relationships, so I can bring 4, 5, 6, 7 relationships that help them get everything done that we talked about that day. So that one-on-one Cash Cabin is entrepreneurs that are doing, over $1 million. That's the key. Or financial advisors are the other ones. Financial advisors, and sometimes I'll meet with them and their business partner. I try to keep it to no more than 2. And I've been in the financial services field, so it's one of those 2. It's a $25,000 investment. Start with a cash recovery and financial expansion session, where they give me some documents and we go through, and I comb through everything and make sure that I can justify us spending the day together. And if I can't, I make the connections off that call and hook them up. And if I can, then we just credit that call over to the Cash Cabin. And I'm looking to make that an unscripted reality series down the road too, because
that's so cool.
Yeah, just because might as well have that higher leverage. I was like, I don't know if people would really open up and share, but we have some clients in Denver, and they have a place in Silverthorne, I think it's called, and we went there and filmed 12 people that had done this, and they still got emotional, and they still shared all their personal stuff on camera. So we just finished kind of the pilot,
so cool
episode, and I think that's going to be kind of fun to do.
Oh, that'd be so cool. That'd be so cool. And I imagine, there's so much value there, I'm sure, for those that attend. And if guys are listening, that this is sounding intriguing, but I also feel like some of those questions that you help them start to ask that they've never thought about asking are the ones that literally are beyond the priceless, And I think that's where all the value is.
Because there's a lot of what people will share. Like it's their story that they share.
It's their story.
Right. And a lot of it is part of the story. So I'm trying to create this really safe space. And I open up with vulnerability first. And if we can get to that trust, then we get to this place I call intimacy, where they're sharing things they've never shared before. So it's stuff that they wouldn't share, but now that they will, we can really start to heal it. We can really start to resolve it. And then finally, what's the stuff they couldn't share because it was a blind spot? And when we can really get there, then they feel so much more powerful, because they leave with clarity, confidence, and peace of mind. And they know precisely what their life's about, and they've created their winning game. So it's fun for me because it's a little bit different every time. Yeah. My favorite place in the world. I put my lodge, and so I'm glad you asked. I don't talk about it all that often, so it's kind of cool to be able to talk about it.
It's intriguing. Yeah, for sure. I feel like it's something that intrigues me personally, and as well as I feel like guys that are listening to this. So it's huge. I was going to ask you, what do you feel like, if it's not too long of a story, is there anything that you do, one of those vulnerable pieces that you do start off with sharing first, that would be worth? I'd love to hear.
Yeah. So like what'll happen is, most of the time I pick someone up from the airport and they don't expect it, because it's not something we say. And the whole time I'm just driving with them, and they don't feel like the thing has started. They just feel like we're hanging out. But then they leave all these clues about what's really important in their life in the stories that they tell. So someone might be like, yeah, I'm going through this thing. I'm worried that that I end up in a lawsuit over it. And I'm like, oh, I got sued once and went to court. Surprising, didn't think it would go that far. I introduced this person to I was a part owner in this building. My partner wanted to raise funds and was going to give up shares in the building to raise those funds. And I introduced this financial guy to him. He lost money in the building because my partner diverted the funds to a different project, which he wasn't supposed to do. And I didn't get paid for that introduction, but I did make the introduction. I wasn't part of the meetings. And so when this person I introduced went after the guy, he declared bankruptcy. So his attorney said, well, let's go after Garrett. He's got more money and a big reputation. So I ended up going to court. And so I talked about what that process was like. I was found not guilty, but I still spent 3 days, just the 3 days.
But stress.
Right, the stress. And then I talked about what I learned on the other side of that. So all of a sudden, we're opening up about this, right? And then they start to feel a little bit less pressure because they're like, oh, okay, so that's what it's really like versus what they imagined. Or, I'll talk about in 2008, man, my marriage was not in a great place. I was over leveraged with real estate. Real estate was going down. I was just trying to keep things together, which meant I was emotionally unavailable. We had 2 young kids. My oldest son was going through some auditory processing issues, and we had to get him in social groups. My wife felt really alone, and it was like a very tough 2 years that we came out the other side in a beautiful way, but it took work and it was emotional. So I might share something like that, or the mistakes I made in the sale of my business. Like, I'm really willing to open up about those things and dive deep into that, and then all of a sudden they're like, oh wait, I'm a human too, not just an author. And it starts to have them start to open up and share things with me that they haven't shared before. And the thing is, they just know it's still trapped there. I'm not ever going to talk about what they're talking about. They might choose to put it on video, and that's fine, but it's not going anywhere. I'm only going to share my side. Once that happens, we really get to a place of like connection. And that's what happens when there's a breakthrough. If there's an intimacy and a breakthrough happens simply because people can process something, then there's just like this deep connection. And what I love about it is I'm pretty much friends with everyone that's ever done an immersion. Like, we still text, we might hang out if I'm in their city. Like, if they're in town here, we're going to go do something. Like, I did an immersion in September. We got done. I'm like, you want to go to this party? We went to the party. I ended up bringing him to stay at my house. We'd never done that with an immersion. We worked out the next day. He ordered a cold plunge afterwards. He ordered a sauna. He ordered a X3 or Harambe. So he had band. Like, I was just like, I'm just letting people into the whole version of who I am because I like that connection. And so, yeah, I mean, who knows? I write half of my blogs from those immersions, like, because I end up sharing a story about myself. I'm like, yeah, I've never put that out there publicly.
That's cool.
But I like it. It's kind of how the content comes up.
I love that. I feel like, obviously Brene Brown and so many other people talk about vulnerability kind of begets more vulnerability, and I love that you start with it first and offering it. But it goes around full circle to what you said kind of earlier in the conversation about how much ego or insecurity is wrapped up in one's self-worth when they believe that their net worth is their self-worth. And without their money, without their watches or cars or, doodads, that then they're nothing. When in reality, what I love about that is that you bring them back to like, nah, man, some of these things are going to come and go. Plus, you're not going to ever take it with you beyond this lifetime. So what is this really for? What are you really seeking underneath the level? Like, money to an end, but you're wanting to experience something, feel something, right? And I love that. You get back to that core.
Well said. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. Well, going back to even more of some of your books, the most recent one you said was Edutainment, right?
It's Money Unmasked.
Money Unmasked is the most recent.
Where I'm really using the edutainment is I Am Money, because it's a kid's book.
Okay.
And so we got pictures but I also wrote this book that isn't out yet, tentatively titled Life After Debt. I have a manuscript, and that's completely using humor to teach this topic of how to navigate the crazy world of consumer debt. And so I want to, I'll end up getting an illustrator and illustrating it and things like that. Haven't done that yet, but that is the plan. It's just one book at a time. I right now I'm creating them a little bit faster than I could promote them. And
it's crazy. Yeah, it's crazy. Well, I'm getting myself confused, but I think it's pretty cool. And so the whole approach towards teaching kids is just to have them have a healthier money mindset, correct?
This book, I Am Money, is like earning, saving, spending, and giving. But it says like, hey, look, when it comes to the basics, money can make you happier, because when you don't have the basics and you're in survival, it's detrimental to your happiness. But after the basics, it's all over the board. Money isn't necessarily capable of being responsible for your happiness. It's a companion and a support, but it's never a solo artist. So it's really saying you're your best asset. Why don't you invest in skill sets? You might learn to sing, or you might set up a lemonade stand. It's got some of those basic things like that. But it says when you get to a place of abundance, you could do the coolest thing. You could freely share, meaning you're no longer just in your own isolated world. And so I think, and my co-author, she's sold so many books. She's written 100 some children's books. And I mean, we're just getting some pretty amazing early reviews on this for sure. And so I'm totally excited about it because money is the character. And my dad used to say that we had a money tree and then eventually said money doesn't grow on trees. And so it's called I am money and I don't grow on trees. So I know people can pre-order it from Barnes and Noble right now if they really want to. I just, the reviews of like my friends reading it to their kids and filming it is special. Like this is a great conversation that when it's had early, I think, dude, here's the deal. Parents are going to learn from reading this. They're going to learn and they don't have to admit they didn't know it. Because it's so simple, yet so profound and has 10 money tips at the back, which I think are really cool too.
And that's really cool. Really cool. When you were a little guy and then obviously going up with your grandfather, your father, and we talked about earlier some of that generational trauma that's passed down, if you will. And I know a lot of guys is the topic of conversation amongst those that I work with. Were there any limiting beliefs that you were raised with, or do you feel like you actually were raised with a pretty good, healthy money mindset?
I mean, my parents were really loving, but they did everything they can to avoid poverty, but got stuck in scarcity because it's like, hey, you never know when the mines could go on strike. And so I was a miser growing up, like didn't ever want to spend money, wanted to coupon clip if that's what it took, or like it was all about not valuing my time enough and not valuing myself enough because it was all about saving, scrimping, sacrificing, budgeting, those kind of things. So the good news is I wasn't ever reckless with money. I never overspend or, I got like, as I was investing later on in life, I got a little over leveraged, but it wasn't because I was living beyond my means. It was because I was investing too quickly and taking too much risk, which was a different lesson I had to learn because that was railing against this notion of like, my family had cash in coffee cans that was buried in the cellar. So, that's not necessarily a good money management methodology. So I started to explore and learn these other things without a lot of guidance. I had to kind of figure it out and make some mistakes along the way. And I had to heal from the notion of like scarcity. I grew up and if you had if you only drank half your drink and then left it, they'd be like, hey, who did this? Or, hey, like my son teasing me. He's like, I could be having an existential crisis and you want to know who left the lights on downstairs. You know what I'm saying? Like, so I do have some of that, but that's only in the worst of times now. I've healed from so much of that I no longer look at that because it's so limited. No one shrinks their way to wealth. Value creation is the game. And value creation is about serving others and solving problems. And it's an expansive game. So the more people we serve, the more value create, the more money we're going to have. So sure, for someone who's lost, maybe saving some money by coupon clipping or buying on Black Friday makes a difference. But for someone who knows their value and is bringing that value to the world, their time is probably worth too much than spending 10 hours to save $100, right? It becomes as you recognize and elevate your value, it's more about how many people you could serve and how deeply you can impact the people you serve, not about in an isolated vacuum how much you could save.
Right. I had an idea or a question and I kind of slipped my mind. I spaced on it, but I guess going back to what you're talking about, just in raising your kids and how you were raised, I imagine just unlearning some of those things have been quite the journey for you. How did you end up working through that? Was it through coaches? Was it through plant medicine? Was it through just offering, like, how do you go from a scarcity mindset to one of just contribution, adding value? Like it sounds easy in your head, but operationally, I feel like so many people can't get out of their own way. They can't even think about posting stuff with them on video because they can't even see them. They don't want to look at themselves. It's like, it's such a big thing for so many people. How did you work through that personally?
I did a lot of things. I did, somatic method with MDMA. I did some psilocybin, and I really feel like that was super helpful as well. But I had joined, strategic coach when I was young. I did Landmark when I was really young. I just was aggressive at getting educated and being around really intelligent people. I remember, talking to people that were further ahead than me, confronting me about my scarcity mindset and my viewpoints. And it really made a difference. Like this one just was talking to me, and she's like, I wonder what it's like to live in the financial prison you built for your wife. And I was like, damn, I'm an asshole, right? Like I didn't see it. It was a blind spot. I was just following my family's way of handling things. And then all of a sudden I overcame that. And even that first year I was married, I did so many stupid things to save money. And my wife loves to tell the stories to my kids because they think that shit's hysterical. They laugh about it. But then, one day my youngest is like, why was dad like that? And my wife was like, I was just doing the best he knew how to help our family.
Yeah, at the time.
Keep our family safe. And and that's the thing is we learn our lessons, we get different perspectives, but I always like to look at very abundant people and ask them questions and be around them. When I wanted to improve my marriage, I said, who are the 3 couples that have the best marriage that are older than us? And we went and really invested time with them. Right now I'm investigating outside of my hometown where I live right now, who are the 5 relationships I want to invest the most time with next year because they change my thinking, they expand my thinking, they challenge my thinking, and they're ahead of where I'm at financially because I'm spending a lot of time with people that I'm the one that's been ahead financially, right? So like I want to get to that outer edge where I'm challenged, where I'm expansive, and where I'm looking at things in a different way. And that's what's been nice about traveling around speaking recently with my book. I've just been attending a lot of the places I'm speaking and learning a lot. Like I just went to Taki Moore's event and I learned a ton in the 2 days I was there. And I went to Denmark.
That's so cool.
And I learned a ton at the 2 days I was there. And, so it's like really cool to be around these people and be like, cool, I spoke, but now I'm listening to these other people who have expertise in other areas that I'm like, I want to continue to be a lifelong learner. And I think sometimes when people at a level of success, they're so busy showing how great they are. Like when I'm insecure, I might try to overdo the talking in a conversation. I might try to show everything I'm up to, which could seem like I'm not creating enough space for the other person, but that's when I'm insecure. And I feel like arrogance is when we want other people to love us more than we love ourselves. And it becomes kind of a repelling. And so I've just got to the point where I'm like, I don't have to let everybody know everything I know. It's okay for me to just learn from them and listen to them too. And that's going to be access. Now I'm willing to give all that I can, but I'm also willing to write that on a blog or put that in a book, or, it doesn't have to be me impressing someone in the moment. It could just be me connecting with someone and learning from them as well.
I think that's pretty powerful. And I think that comes with growth, healing, maturity, if you will. Because I imagine, I'll just ask you, what used to motivate you to make money back in your teens, 20s, maybe before 2008?
In my teens, it was like, I just want to see dollars in a bank account. Like I just wanted to become a millionaire in my teenage years. Like $1 million, it didn't matter if it was in savings. I just wanted to look at it in a bank, right? I didn't think about like
just see it. Yeah.
And in my 20s, it was like, I got to be a multimillionaire, and I got to have more employees than other people so I could brag about my employees, and I got to have bigger revenue so I could tell people how impressive my revenue is. I got to have this beautiful building that's winning architectural awards because I have to demonstrate. Not only can I tell them, I got to show them, and I got to drive. Like a lot of it was materialistic in my 20s, from the office that we did have that was beautiful to the Bentley that I did drive. And it's fine if people want to drive nice cars. Just I like my truck better than any other vehicle. It's other people love those fast cars, and great. Find out what your value-based spending is. Don't just buy it because it's impressive to someone else. Buy it because it's fulfilling to you.
Yes,
so
amen.
Yeah, that was totally the motivation. I wanted you to think I was a badass, 100%. Like I wanted you to by me.
Did that switch during the kind of the bubble of 2008?
The 2008 thing was the thing that switched for me.
Oh.
And because I was like, damn, I was out on a limb. I was so much of my time was grinding and always working and always doing something and never present. And I was gaining weight. And I was like, dude, this isn't a good life. So I was like, what's it going to look like moving forward? My 30s became this like intellectual property revolution. In my 30s, it was about, I'm creating books. And I still was a little bit in the grind at times, but like I did a really good job at like learning and teaching and capturing that, which was a lot more fun. In my 40s, I'm like really navigating like, how do I just love life? And it's been a little bit messy because being a comedian, I don't just go small. I had 8 Emmy winners on the crew for my comedy special. I dropped a ton of money filming that damn thing and getting it out there, and didn't raise funds for it. And like, if you look at my books, like Money Unmasked, like I invest a ton of money in the aesthetic of it and the experience of it. So I've become more of an artist. And as many artists, they start to overdo the art and not the finance. And so it's nice because I have a financial background. So I tend to balance that out a whole lot quicker. And, I just spent a ton of money in 2021 and 2022 as this new, expansion as an artist. And now I'm going, how do I make sure that impacts the world, and how do I make sure I monetize that properly? And, I've been able to reel it back in. But yeah, this foray on doing a theatrical keynote, on writing a kid's book, on
so cool.
on doing the comedy special. Dude, that comedy special is probably the coolest 5 months of my life, from the time I chose to do it, started writing it, rehearsing it on a daily basis, and then filming it. Like, it's one of those things that my kids got to watch it. They got to see me, they got to see me overcome my insecurities. We signed a contract last week with a distributor, so it's been one hell of a journey, man.
Well, I was going to add, that's my next follow-up question. You started to talk about, it's called The American Ream, correct?
Yes.
And
2024, we should see it out somewhere.
That's what I was going to ask you. Where? Okay, so it's not out yet.
Yeah, it's a distributor called Multicom that they work with all the different services to get it placed, and I'm excited about that.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Well, dude, thank you so much for joining me. I feel like I could keep going, but just for the sake of respecting your time and those that are listening, I just appreciate you pouring into the conversation, and love how much you're just inspiring, just me personally, just with everything you got going on. Killing it, making sure that you're also being an amazing husband, amazing father, just contributing and raising the frequency of the world. I love that. But thank you for being on. For guys who want to connect with you, obviously, as we often talked about, social media or picking up your books, where can they find all the goods?
Yeah, so youtube.com/Garrett Gunderson TV. Subscribe there. I'm posting every day, basically.
Beautiful.
I respond to comments if I can understand what they're saying. On Instagram, it's Garrett B. Gunderson. I'm new to Instagram, so be patient, but I'm actually sitting in the sauna responding to people. We'll see how long I can keep up with that. And then I have a blog at my website, garrettgunderson.com/musings. And I mean, these are long blogs. Some of them take 19 minutes to read, because I harvest the whole lesson and I'm not using ChatGPT. But those are a few ways we can stay connected for sure.
I love it. And what about the quiz on your website? Yeah. What does that really focus on?
/quiz, garrettgunderson.com/quiz. Figure out your money persona. What's the shout side? What's the winning side? Share it with your loved ones so you understand how they operate around money. And it'll really transform life. I mean, it really helps to understand my kids' money persona, my wife's money persona. Like, my kids and I will watch a TV series, and my kids can point out what the money personas are of the different characters.
That's cool.
My nephew, who's young, understands money personas and can call it out. So it's something that even a kid can understand, but every adult can benefit from. That's
such a gift, man. That's so cool. Well, I appreciate you.
Thanks for having me on, man. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's been really good. It's been really good. I'm definitely will put all the links below the video, below the podcast, all that good stuff for those that are listening and watching. Connect with Garrett. Obviously, do yourself a solid and follow him on all the different links that I'll put down here. And thank you again, brother. Really appreciate you being on.
Have a great, move back to Denver. Good luck.
Thank you.
And
thank you.
And take care. Really.
Yeah, you too. Thank you guys for listening. Like I said, give Garrett a follow. And thank you again for joining us on this episode of the Becoming Kings podcast. We'll talk to you soon. Cheers.